Hello, Sam Houston. My name is Victoria Villanueva. I created my reading autobiography on the program S'more, and I recorded myself reading the autobiography out loud. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I titled this Vicky's Reading Autobiography for Young Adult Literature 5385. Early years. I was born in Miami, Florida. I am the daughter of two immigrant parents. My father was born, raised, and studied in Mexico, and he knew no English when he came to the United States. My mother is from Cuba. She was fluent in both English and Spanish. I am the third child of four siblings. And although my father knew, he only spoke Spanish and he knew no English, he knew it was very important for us to be surrounded by books written both in English and in Spanish. So he often brought home many children's books. Some of the most memorable ones were from Dr. Seuss. My favorite was One Fish, Two Fish. And I would love to hear how the words flowed from one phrase to the next, and that it helped me become engaged with reading. I also had a copy of José Martí's La Edad de Oro, and this book I adored listening to my father read the short stories. One thing that I do remember was how the weather was very hot and humid in Florida, but it rained for days, and I loved to listen to my father read. And he would open a window in the living room and we could hear the rain falling in the background. Each story that he read to us had a moral, and we would discuss the lessons and themes before we would move on to the next story. I listened to them so much I memorized almost all of the words. I also discovered that many stories were written in order to teach us a lesson, which made me give a great importance to reading. So when we moved to Brownsville, and I began to attend school here in South Texas, I was introduced to a different kind of literature. It wasn't only children's stories that I was reading or nursery rhymes, but I began to read short novels. One of the first ones was Robinson Crusoe, and I began to notice that it was very difficult for me to read, more difficult than it was for my peers. This struggle turned into an insecurity. And I wondered why it was so difficult for me to read, why I couldn't decode the words like my friends did. And it wasn't until I was in the fourth grade that my teacher, Mrs. Berryman, discovered I had dyslexia. What was dyslexia? How did I get it? Would I ever be able to read and write as my classmates did? I was very confused at that time in my life. But I was very determined to overcome my struggles. So I went home every single day, and my mother and my father would sit and read with me. And my father would tell me that, I could learn to read. And he would tell me, si yo puedo, tú también puedes. If I can learn to read, so can you. It was very frustrating, but it was well worth the struggle to learn to read. So we would sit together in the evenings and we learned to read together. My first reading assignment was Robinson Crusoe. It was the first real book I had ever really finished cover to cover, and I knew I had to continue to read every single day. I had to make my father proud of me. After all, if he could learn to read in English without really knowing the language, then I could too. I was determined to overcome this. So I began to go to my school library at Martin Elementary, where Mrs. Berg was a librarian, and every day she would help me to find books that I could read, and she would guide me into checking out books, and she really became a very influential person to me at the time. I checked out books like the American Girl series. I also read The Boxcar Children, Island of the Blue Dolphins, titles by Beverly Cleary's, and I moved on eventually to Charlotte's Web, A Wrinkle in Time, The Secret Garden, Anne of Green Gables. It was in the sixth grade that my reading skills were so polished that I entered the GT program. So sixth grade was a big year for me. In sixth grade, my teacher, Sister Monica, which was my literature teacher, she helped me read Bridge to Terabithia. And after I read that book, I became, I fell completely in love with literature, and it opened up more doors to me because I loved reading that much more. I included some memorable titles over here at the bottom. El Principito, which is a Spanish story that I loved to read as a child, and I still love to read it now. And I remember my aunts would read to me this story, to me and to my siblings on the living room floor of my grandparents' home back in Florida. Anne of Green Gables. I remember my mother helping me read this story, and I loved to listen to her use all the expressions she had in her heart to read out loud to me and to my sister. Bridge to Terabithia. In the 6th grade, my teacher, Sister Monica, helped me to read this story. Her memory lives on whenever I turn the pages of this book. I'm going to jump from middle school into college because unfortunately in high school I didn't have any big influences or anything that really helped make me fall in love with reading even more. It's unfortunate, but I'm going to go ahead and jump to college. So in college, I decided to major in English and minor in Spanish. The teacher that I remember the most is Dr. Martinez. He gave a class in American Realism. I loved the class. We read works from authors like William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, and Tennessee Williams. They were the major authors that we learned about in this class. In college, I minored in Spanish, which included literature classes like Literatura Infantil, which is children's literature. This class focused on children's books by authors of Latin America. I also took a class on Miguel de Cervantes and Gabriel Marquez. The classes hooked me into reading in a more sophisticated manner, more sophisticated level. Okay, and now I teach reading. So now that I'm a middle school reading teacher, I incorporate a novel every 6 weeks. I allow my students to read books like The Outsiders, The One and Only Ivan, Ida B, Prisoner B, 3087, House of Mango Street, Esperanza Rising, and many others. My desire to want to inspire children to read is what is driving me to accomplish my goal right now, which is receiving my master's in library science. Some of the ways that I help students enjoy reading is I allow them to write alternative endings to chapters or to novels that we have read. I also allow them to create little plays, and they get to act out the story. They get to dress up in costumes, and they get to write scripts, and they get to pretend that they are a character in the story. And this really helps them to be more engaged into reading. So this is how I help my kids learn to love to read and how I spread my love of reading to others. I also do one-act plays in school with the kids, and they really do enjoy this. I put some book cover titles here on my reading autobiography. These are some of the book titles that I like to read to my kids now, my students. And these are some of the book titles that I learned to read with. Ramona the Pest, Ramona Forever, Beezus and Ramona. This is really what I think about when I think about elementary reading when I was a child. I do enjoy reading today. Since I teach middle school, I really enjoy young adult literature. So whenever I do have a chance to read, that's what I like to read. When do I like to read? I enjoy reading the most when everybody is asleep. I am a mother of 3 children. My oldest son is 10. My middle child is 6, my 6-year-old son, and then I have a little girl who is 4. So whenever I do get a chance to read, I like to read when it is quiet in the house, and that's well after 10 p.m. I like to read in my room or in the kitchen, and that's about it. That brings me to today, and I hope that I was able to explain a little bit about my struggles growing up learning to read and who really influenced me the most reading and how I now spread the love of reading to my own students. Thank you for listening. I am Victoria Villanueva. Thank you.